Hey guys, this has been a really crazy 17 hours. Texas doesn't get cold like this. It got down to 10 degrees last night. And to make matters worse, I guess they chose us for the rolling blackouts first. They're not calling it that, but there's nothing wrong with our infrastructure in this part of Texas. I was at the truck stop. It's the closest thing to me is a truck stop several miles away. And I found out that everybody in my area slept in their cars last night if they didn't have generators. I have a generator. It's a pretty good one, and it's providing power to two buildings. But I've got 4 heaters going. One of them's for my dogs, and the other ones are all in the shop because I've been spending all my time. Got a nice couch out there laid out in the wood shop, and it's just I wasn't going to use this building at all, but for the video today. So we're going to get to this video. I'm doing good. I'm doing great. Generator saved my ass, but I had to move around and get some supplies. I had to go buy a lot more hay and cedar for my dogs, and this is crazy. This is insane. It's absolutely insane how cold it got last night. Wind came in, and how the power's been out for like 17 to 19 hours, right? 7:30 last night the power went out. It's 2 o'clock right now. So how ironic that I'm doing an Ice Age video, the only Ice Age video I've ever done at this time in my life when I'm freezing my ass off. It's crazy. So anyway, I mean, I've got like 11 of these all dispersed as well. And for those of you who don't know, these old oil lamps, they provide a lot of heat. So I'm okay. Well, we need to get this video done. Ice Age Technics, Vapor Canopy, and how Graham Hancock has threatened establishment science. Yeah, there's a lot of opposition against Graham Hancock. And I am too, but only the chronological material. I've told you guys in the past, there's a lot of stuff about Hancock's books I do like, and we are in agreement on many things, but not the chronological material. So, listen, for over 200 years, artifacts, buried cities, underground relics, submerged forests, traditions of our ancestors, surviving texts of the old world, this combination of data from so many different sources resulted in an accepted worldview that the world was repeatedly destroyed. This was accepted by science, that there were cycles and epicycles in resets and cataclysms. The writings of Plato and Herodotus, Pliny, Strabo, Diodorus Siculus, Tacitus, Livy, I've read all these. I've cited them many times. Augustus, Arnobius, Ammianus Marcellinus, and there are so many others, but they left us whole descriptions of these terrific destructions. So Marcus Varro's another good one. So the history of the world, it was known to all, scientists and laymen, as a catastrophist model. There was no other opposing theories. It was understood. The history of the world was one of earthquakes. Like Lucretius said, it was periodic destructions. And because Christianity and its ideals were in vogue, during this period of time, the idea and concept of God was often attached to these destructions. The 15th, 16th, and 17th centuries, they were basically molded in part by these beliefs. Then the 18th century came around and scientists began entertaining new ideas. Uniformitarianism was a slow construction and one fraught with deception, manipulation, and outright lies. You guys remember Piltdown, man? That's just one of the frauds that they perpetuated to push evolution. So the development of the theories of natural selection and evolution of Lyell and Darwin, they contributed to a false interpretation of reality. And it's a major contributor to the Ice Age deception. Our story begins here. It begins in the Swiss Alps. It is the year 1744. So Pierre Martel, he's an engineer and geographer. He is living in Geneva. He reports that the inhabitants of the Alps attributed the dispersal of erratic boulders to glaciers. Basically he said that that these glaciers that deposited these giant boulders in weird places all throughout the Swiss Alps, that they did this over different periods of time. This was a novel idea, but it explained, because in the Swiss Alps there are gigantic boulders that are out of place. They are made of different materials than the native rock. So in 1815, Jean-Pierre, I can't, listen guys, I cannot pronounce this guy's name. Perrodin, he explained, I guess Jean-Pierre Perrodin, but he explained erratic boulders in the Val de Bagnes in the Swiss canton of Valais as being due to glaciers previously extending further. You guys are going to have to, I apologize, you're just going to have to deal with it. I got dogs barking in the background. There's people in the neighborhood walking around sharing cables and hot water and coffee. And yeah, I don't know if you can hear the drum of my generator. It's on the outside of this wall and about 40 feet away. But it's the only way I got my computer going right now. So there's a little bit of background noise. But he had believed that these glaciers extended in the past a lot further than they do today, but not all the way to the equator. And in 1818, the Swedish botanist Göran Waldenberg published his theory of a glaciation of the Scandinavian peninsula, but he regarded this glaciation as a regional phenomenon, not something that had happened worldwide. In the same year of 1818, a lake dammed by a glacier burst through, and geologists for the first time were able to see and research one of these things, and they learned quite a bit about the phenomenon itself. This underwater glacial lake had just built up from meltwater. It burst through, flooded a whole bunch of area, and it deposited loam and gravel and boulders, and they were able to see this firsthand, what it did in the Rhone Valley. And it made sense of all the weird geography they had seen all throughout the Rhone Valley and the Alps in Europe. So this gave rise to the first glaciologist. Glaciology began with, ironically, a disaster in 1818. Now, Jean de Charpentier, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, and a man named Ignaz Vennes. These guys in 1821 theorized that these glaciers were actually the things that were depositing these boulders further south from the North Pole. So in 1824, the Danish-Norwegian geologist, his name is Jens Esmark, he argued for a sequence of worldwide ice ages in a paper published in that year of 1824. Esmark proposed changes in climate as the cause of those glaciations. He attempted to show that they originated from changes in the Earth's orbit. Now, you have to understand, at this period of time, there were many scientists that proposed papers that were equally fascinating, but they were ignored by Scientifica because they promoted the catastrophist ideas and theory, that it was a comet, that there was some type of bolide, that there was maybe a solar flare, a great flood, major earthquakes, volcanism, anything that even promoted an idea that a natural disaster or a cataclysm occurred and it is the result of why the world is the way it is today was ignored at this time by the scientific community. But they promoted this guy because he was talking about climate change, which promotes uniformitarianism, the very slow processes by which our world was supposedly created. So in 1834, Charpentier, he submitted his glacial theory to a convention of scientists at Geneva, and the reaction was hostile instantly. This is the scientific community. These glaciologists, they hit a wall. So, and he was also met with derision and scorn. He remained steadfast, though, but he challenged the scientific community. All his critics, he said, okay, why don't you come out here to these sites and come see what I'm talking about? I will show you what I'm talking about. And somebody took him up on it. In 1835, 1 year later, Carl Schimper was studying mosses, which were growing on erratic boulders, and he had made some excursions into the Bavarian Alps and also saw some boulders, erratic boulders. Well, Schimper came to the conclusion that ice must have been the means of transport for the boulders to the Alpine uplands. So in 1835, Carl Schimper began a series of lectures explaining how glaciers carried rock debris, and in these dissertations he began theorizing that these cold episodes that formed glaciers must have been a global phenomenon. And so the following year, in 1836, Schimper and Louis Agassiz took Charpentier's offer, his challenge, and they visited the sites for themselves, and he gave them a tour to see the glacial evidence that was cited 2 years earlier in Geneva. Agassiz took that research and the observations of Charpentier and Venetz and Schimper, and a theory was developed of a sequence of glaciations. But it wasn't Agassiz's theory. He took all this data from all his predecessors and the very men who showed it to him. And in 1837, early in the year, Schimper coined the term Ice Age. 1837, the term Ice Age was invented. Now, up until this time, no concept of Ice Age at all. The history of the world worked just fine according to the historical records. Ice Ages weren't needed to promote anything. But in 1837, Agassiz presented their synthesis before the annual meeting of a convention of scientists. This is 1837. The audience was very critical, and they even opposed the new theory because it contradicted the established opinions on climate history. Most of the contemporary scientists of the day thought that Earth had been gradually cooling since its birth as a molten globe. Rejected, Agassiz set out in the field to gather more evidence. He was going to get his own geological evidence, independent of the three men's data that he basically stole. In 1840, Louis Agassiz published all the research in his book, Studies on Glaciers. The book received some attention, and Charpentier was offended because he too was preparing a scientific book on glaciers, and it was he who introduced glaciology to Agassiz and shared with him his data. So to add insult to injury, Agassiz had omitted all references to Schimper as well, from whom he had received a lot of the information on glaciation. Louis Agassiz, who went on to basically to appropriate the ideas as his own, much to Schimper's and Charpentier's dismay, undeservedly received most of the credit for their origination. And here is where the matter lied for a quarter of a century. Glacial theory percolated, but it did not catch on. The idea of Ice Age was in the back of the scientific minds, but the theory did not advance because any promotion of Ice Age equally promoted a catastrophist model of history until the mid-1870s. In 1875, James Kroll published Climate and Time in their Geological Relations, which provided a credible explanation for the causes of ice ages that was totally in line with the new models of natural selection and evolution. His model explained that these ice ages happened over vast periods of time. Only now did the scientific community get on board. So, understand what's happening here. The scientific community didn't get on board because James Kroll provided new data. He provided a new interpretation of the old data, one that was in line with the direction the scientific community was trying to go. That's not science, but that's what we're told is exactly what happened. March 15th, in the year 2021, just last year, the University of Vermont scientists found frozen plant fossils preserved under a mile of ice in Greenland. Now, this was promoted as sensational. It was a sensationalist claim, but there's nothing sensational about it. It made a lot of headway, a lot of news, but this has been going on for a very long time. You just don't know about it because you're not buried in the old books. The discovery, it helps to confirm a new and troubling understanding that the Greenland ice sheet has melted entirely during recent warm periods in Earth's history. That a mass flash freeze happened is evidence in both hemispheres. Frozen flora and fauna in North America, Alaska, Siberia, the Arctic, they've all been excavated from the permafrost and below the ice. Guys, you can't make this up. Mammoths, bison, sloths all froze solid instantly, some of them with undigested plants still on their tongues. Some of them in the 1800s were being thawed out, and locals in Siberia were still eating the meat. Since 1910, fossils have been found in Antarctica. Recently, a petrified forest was found in Antarctica under the ice sheet. The island of Spitsbergen is in the Arctic Ocean. It's north of Norway. It is 12 miles, no, excuse me, it is 12 degrees south of the North Pole. Fossils of tropical fruits have been found in coal deposits at Spitsbergen. Listen, Spitsbergen, 12 degrees away from the North Pole, and yet under the ice are 95 species of trees, including yews, hazels, elders, beech, lime trees, magnolia, and others. There were 11 species of palm trees under the ice just south of that in Switzerland. And swamp cypress, tulip trees, liquid amber, sweet gum, fig trees, cinnamon trees, and fruit trees of the cherry, plum, and almond species, all under the ice. In Spitsbergen are willows that are only found in southern Europe, 12 degrees away from the North Pole. This data is in the 1885 book, The Prehistoric World, Vanished Races by E.A. Allen, but he's only citing an earlier archaeological research book published. Over 900 pages of scientific data was published in what's called the Manual of Geology that was compiled by James Dana, 1800s. Listen, the Miocene, the Eocene, the Holocene, the Pleistocene, the Dryas, the Younger Dryas, these are all fictions created by scientists as new data sets are accepted as true, but the information doesn't comport with the accepted model. So a new period was added. This is how they put all these together. And thus the chronology is expanded to even further back in history. And every bit of it, the scientists love it because it helps promote natural selection and evolution. A massive amount of research, discoveries, fossils, excavations, reports, books all having been filtered through the uniformitarian view of history. Meaning that the data had to be interpreted and presented as if it takes hundreds of thousands and millions of years for Earth changes to occur. But then, every bit of it could be abbreviated to a very short period of time if we didn't use that uniformitarian filter. The collapse of the vapor canopy not only produces the necessary humidity needed in the polar extremities for the abundant snowfall, but it was all at once, meaning the collapse of the watery mesosphere created the ice caps almost instantly when the world froze. When the megafauna, giant bison, mammoths, huge sloths, the marsupials, vast forests of the Antarctic and Arctic, they were all rapidly buried under thousands of feet of snow, frozen solid. The moisture of the mesosphere became the snows of the ice cap. Once the vapor canopy was gone, the sun ruled the sky. The necessary humidity in the polar regions was no longer present. Most of the canopy now frozen in packed ice from the weight of the accruing snow. Within a century, the Arctic and Antarctic then enjoyed only 2 to 3 inches of snow every year. And this tiny amount of snowfall seen by scientists today, who are trained to think only in the uniformitarian terms, makes them push back the ice ages to impossible dates far beyond when they actually happened. Because they refuse to entertain the catastrophist model that shows that these ice caps could have been formed in weeks or months, not 10,000 years, we get the bogus theories of ice ages in the Miocene, Eocene, and the Pleistocene, and the Dryas. The average thickness of the Antarctic ice cap is 1.34 miles, but for simple math, we'll say 1.5 miles. We'll give it some, 1.5 miles. That's 7,920 feet. This is 95,045 inches. At an inch a day of snowfall, just 1 inch a day of snowfall, this would have taken 260 years to reach 1.5 miles. That's not 10,000 years. That's just 260 years. But you also have to note, there is no snowfall in Antarctica today more than 2 inches a year because it's too cold. And cold air doesn't hold moisture. This isn't Jason telling you this. Any scientific book will tell you why there are so many anomalies about the Arctic and Antarctica, how the ice caps were formed is one of the greatest controversies of science that laymen don't even know is raging in Scientifica. Let me explain. This is the danger of uniformitarianism, to claim that the 2 inches of snowfall today is the way that it has always been. The belief that the snowfall has been consistent 10,000 years has also corrupted the interpretation of the ice core data. Their models are uniformitarian, so their conclusions are that long periods had passed. Scientists abhor a knowledge vacuum. This means that they will promote any theory or model of history that advances uniformitarianism as long as the catastrophist model is ignored and never taken seriously. It is my opinion that the criticism and resistance Graham Hancock has suffered recently with his Netflix series Ancient Apocalypse is because of 2 items that uniformitarians stringently oppose. Hancock and his followers are of the opinion that the scientific community is so opposed to the idea of an advanced civilization in the Ice Age, but that's not their true issue. By dating this civilization at the Younger Dryas, Hancock has brought worldwide attention to a period that scientists have really tried to pass off as fact without having their data reviewed upon closer scrutiny. You see, what is not popularly known is that there are over 60 different theories as to how ice ages could even be possible. It's a fact that the issue is one that has never been agreed upon by all of academia. Yeah, there have been many scientific papers, and they're diabolically opposed to each other. Because older temperatures are less able to hold water vapor, the amount of rain or snow would be reduced, not increased. This single fact has been a real problem for Ice Age theory. When a phenomenon cannot be explained by existing data, the theories multiply. This is what has happened with the Ice Age idea. The 60-plus theories that have been published as to the cause of the ice ages actually serves a nefarious purpose. The focus has shifted from, hey, you guys still haven't made your case for the ice ages, to the modern, hey, you guys still can't figure out how the ice ages happened? The latter is designed to infer that ice ages are absolute truth and only their causes are unknown. The other great threat to the official model that Hancock has brought attention to is the idea that it was a cataclysm that ended this period of the Ice Age, which brings against the long-censored catastrophist interpretation of the data sets that we have been told only lead to uniformitarian chronology. Graham Hancock's proposition calls into question all over again what took establishment scientists a century to bury. The fact that the catastrophist model actually does answer all the data sets and that uniformitarianism is a false interpretation of history. The evidence of this is that there are 60 different theories as to why or how ice ages could happen. But in catastrophist model, only one theory exists, and it's the right one. All promote the ice ages, but they are widely variant in their beliefs as to how these were even possible. And this is because the humidity conditions at the poles required to create the ice caps could never have happened because of worldwide cooling. Let me repeat this. Scientists assert that the world cooling would not create ice caps because the colder temperatures does away with the requisite humidity. It requires immense humidity to create the snowfall necessary to build up the ice caps. And the collapse of the vapor canopy in 2239 BC answers for this mystery. And what this means for you and the Archaix research is that an ice age is certainly possible, but it was within the last 5,000 years, and the mechanism for its inception was the collapse of the vapor canopy. It was the day the sky fell. You know this as the Great Flood. Another indicator that the ice caps we have today are relatively new is the existence of the Orance Finet's 1534 world map that shows an ice-free Antarctica. And of course the more famous Piri Reis map, the Turkish navigator, depicted in Charles Hapgood's Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings. 2 ancient maps showing Antarctica free of ice. This means that within the last 2,000 years or so, someone had navigated and explored the region and mapped it out when there were no ice sheets to impede them. So how is this possible? Actually, it's simple. In 2239 BC, the vapor canopy collapsed and provided us ice caps from the abundant water vapor turned snow. Over a few thousand years, glaciation deposited boulders and topsoils further from the poles, and the ice caps almost disappeared, allowing for navigation and cartography. Then in 522 AD, the Phoenix phenomenon returned, and there was a 25-year darkness. The sun dimmed, and a new vapor canopy formed, but it didn't stay. It almost instantly collapsed after a quarter of a century, and this again provided the necessary humidity to again bury the poles in snow. Only the catastrophist model answers for the enigmas and data sets, and Graham Hancock has inadvertently drawn attention back to a major hole in scientific theory. It's the fictitious Younger Dryas period. I have many problems with Graham Hancock's chronological dating of different things, and especially using the Atlantis narrative to promote a 9,500 or 10,000 BC civilization. But outside of that, I do agree with him in many aspects of his research. But this is my presentation on the Ice Age. We could actually do probably 5 or 6 videos on this topic, but it wouldn't produce any new outcomes. All it would do is go over more and more data. So I tried to keep this as abbreviated as possible. I didn't want this to go over 30 minutes. Excuse me. But I got to get back to my dogs. I got to spread out some more hay and some cedar. They got a heater, and it's in a cage, but I got to insulate that because I can't have them burning when it's 22 degrees tonight or whatever it's going to be. Yeah, I'm doing good, guys. I just this cold snap caught me off guard simply because we just lost power about 19 hours ago, and it still ain't up. So, hope you guys enjoyed this presentation, and our next live will be episode 2 Q&A, the day after Christmas.